The problem with Iran is every time they make a deal, the people that are in charge there, they either break it or they want to change it. So it looks like they're not ready to make a deal. So they're going to continue to pay a price. And every night the price gets higher and higher and higher.
Iran not backing down following a 12th night of strikes by the United States. President Trump telling Axios he is considering a massive attack, bigger than ever before on Iran, and he is close to making a decision. West Texas Intermediate oil, as we follow it, is nearing $92 a barrel. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Dagan McDowell, along with my co-hosts Taylor Riggs, Brian Bremberg, Jackie DeAngelis, and with us for this hour, Making Money host Charles Payne.
Welcome.
Double thumbs up. Market's going to turn around on that. The standoff with Iran is only escalating. Iran-backed Houthis claiming attacks on 2 Saudi Arabian oil tankers in the Red Sea. That's sending oil higher. Traders pricing in the threat of a global energy supply disruption. The national average for gasoline here at home is $4.09 a gallon and heading higher. President Trump preaches patience.
And oil will be coming, it's going to be tumbling down. It was 3 weeks ago. They thought we had a deal. I said, I don't think we have a deal with these guys. They break every deal they make. But I said, but people thought the geniuses on Wall Street, they came down, really down, and goes back up a little bit. But it's going to come down maybe lower than when we even started. But just give me a little time. I always say, give me a little.
Charles, what are you watching here? How do you see it?
D, all of the above.
I was going, okay, you can go through A, B, and C. So
last night I was watching all of the CapEx spending, and I was excited about that. This morning I was watching a spike in oil prices and, of course, the bond yields. And that's superseding everything right now. On one hand, it's kind of interesting because, again, if you start talking about choking off, closing down 2 critical choke points on oil, up $5 or whatever we are in West Texas, 91, 92. It's unnerving. But again, it's still not 120 where in the past I've been on the street and in the markets where geopolitical risk used to be 20 or $30. So President Trump talking about Wall Street, they're still kind of giving or maybe hoping for the benefit of the doubt that maybe this will end sooner rather than later. The taco trade charts are popping up all over the place. Some calculations on that.
Oh boy.
Because there has been a pain threshold, and President Trump is trying to manage that by saying, hey, give me some time, and I think they're trying that because initially we weren't necessarily getting that, right? But I think right now, because a lot of people, not just Wall Street, but a lot of folks are cautiously optimistic that the Iran conflict was over and that we could get back to normal.
I take your markets, your equities, your oil, and I raise you a bond yield. I like that you talked about that as well. And I think I have some good news, and maybe we'll think that it's negative as the day progresses. But our 2-year yield is the highest now since February 2025, 10-year the highest since May. But here's the good news. Right now, it's real yields. Why do we care? Because real yields means real growth, a bet on growth in the future, not necessarily inflation. Real yield is the highest since September of 2024. The 10-year real yield is the highest since October of 2023. So, Dagan, I know you've been talking about yields all week. And the nice thing is that since late February, the rise in yields has been due to real yields. But here's the bad news. If oil does stay around these levels, then that's when the nominal yield's going to go up because of the inflation part of the equation, not because of the growth part of the equation. And I think that's right now what investors are trying to figure out is we like the growth story, but then I think we're going to get hit with an inflationary story soon, especially at $100 per barrel. And then I'll end kind of on another good news, bad news. In terms of the overall economy, jobless claims, were they the lowest since like the
1969.
60s? 1969. Yeah. So that's incredible that this economy, maybe it's a low hire, but it's a low fire. No one's getting laid off. The bad part of that is that if this is a Federal Reserve that's now looking at inflation creeping up and they're thinking the economy looks just fine, real yields are strong and jobless claims are weak, and in this case, weak is good, then maybe there is more room to think about the inflation side of the mandate because the growth side isn't so scary. That's sort of where I'm thinking about things today.
I'm going to quote you, Dagan, back to yourself from yesterday. We are in it. We're finally in it. The president gave diplomacy a chance. Marco Rubio saying Iran's still not ready to make a deal. They jerked us around as a country for quite some time, went back and forth, wasted time, bought themselves some time. Not that we didn't know and weren't making those calculations, but having said that, I do believe, and I always said this from the beginning, that the president felt before there was an escalated conflict, he had to prove to the American people that the road of diplomacy had been given a shot. And I would say it was given a shot and then some by this administration. I am truly, truly mesmerized by the kinds of patience that they had and that this didn't all kind of come to a head a little bit sooner. But here we are with oil at roughly $90 a barrel. That's West Texas. And you've got Brent just sitting under that $100 mark, although it hit it. And I just pulled up the weekly averages on production here in the United States and want to point out that we are close to almost 14 million barrels a day. Those numbers after, during COVID and after COVID had plummeted under Joe Biden, even when the economy was back up and running, because obviously the Democrats and that administration were pursuing a clean energy policy instead of looking at America and saying, what do we need to do right now to stay ahead and be number one? So our production is at record levels, and that's really important, and it's why oil is staying around this $90 mark. I'm not saying it can't go higher. We talked about 120 being a bad place for oil to go, and it's possible with this exacerbation that it could go up into those levels. But, had we not been at this production level, we could see $150 barrel oil, and that's not even speaking to the Brent price. So keeping all those things in perspective and understanding what the president's objective is, this is the time that you buckle your seatbelt and you trust that we have the intelligence and the assets are being moved there, is my understanding, reports of that overnight, to kind of take on the next phase of this. And I think what they've outlined as an administration is to go in phases. You hit us, we'll hit you back. It's not like, it's this kind of all-out offensive, although that potentially could be coming. One final point that I thought was really interesting, and it's kind of being discussed in the backdrop of all of this, is that nuclear deal for nuclear energy facilities in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. would partner with them and create business interests. And there was some concern about that because of what that really means, what it signifies. Yesterday, when we talked about it, I immediately brought up the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia is not party to that agreement. That was Trump 1.0. But now President Trump is saying he will not move forward with any kind of deal like this without Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, which I think would just be massive in terms of the stability that it adds to the region. Whether or not they are willing to do that, the conversations, per Caroline Levitt, are ongoing. But I wanted to add that detail because I think it's really important. And we were discussing sort of the energy race and what could happen and how you create a stabler region. In Levitt's briefing that she was giving, somebody asked her, why is it okay for Saudi Arabia to have a civil nuclear program, but the Iranians can't have one? Because nobody trusts the Iranians. And we've seen time and time again what they do and how they lie to us and the rest of the world, and it's just not possible. If you have Saudi Arabia, who with MBS is more on the side of the United States than I would say ever, joining the Abraham Accords, saying we are also aligning with Israel, you create a completely different dynamic in the Middle East. And this is where I thought the president was going to be going with this yesterday, because he has always said that he wants to expand that alliance and make it even bigger. So there's some really exciting things happening in the backdrop of conflict as well.
Question for you. Do you think the stability you get from Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords outweighs the potential instability of introducing another nuclear actor in the Middle East?
I do.
Question.
I do. Because I mean, listen. Whether or not we've fully been aligned with Saudi Arabia all the time, that kingdom has, always put its interests first. We've always had good relations. Let's call it good relations with them. I don't see the Saudis doing anything nefarious with their nuclear program unless the dynamics really changed. And this would give us an opportunity to be a part of it, to really know what was happening on the ground. Again, the Iranians want to do their civil program without inspections and without allowing us to know what's happening.
Right.
And that is why they can't be trusted. So I would say also it kind of gives the region a little heads up that stuff is changing here. Things are happening. And there's a new sheriff in town, not only in America, but now kind of a different dynamic over there, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure the play with Saudi Arabia is a play to counter China. And I like that. And the president's been really good on that front. My concern is I want the Saudi Arabia nuclear deal to be more airtight than the memorandum of understanding we had with Iran.
Of course.
Right? And I don't know a lot about the Saudi deal. I knew something about the Iran deal. That memorandum was not very airtight. As always, my concern usually isn't what's Trump doing and how will he handle it. It's what's the next guy going to do with the deal he cut.
I hear you.
And that's where I'm not, I appreciate Saudi Arabia, but I'm not in the camp of trust them to babysit the kids. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And so that's where I get a little nervous about this.
But Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and all these other nations, they over the last several years have shown that they were prefer peace.
Yeah.
Because with peace comes prosperity.
Yeah.
And I think that's our ace in the hole. And our ability to try to tell every single nation who can and can't necessarily have nukes is a tough one, as we're seeing with Iran. And so. At this point, I agree with everything you just said, because there's also the China threat, and
the Russia threat. Can I add one other thing? We were talking yesterday about where is Iran getting all these drones from, and we speculate that China's sending a lot of them. There are analysts that were on the news channel today also saying Russia's probably sending a portion of that as well.
Targeting.
So,
how do they're targeting CIA facilities.
Yeah.
They're getting that intel from Russia.
Yeah.
100% from Russia. So, yeah, we probably would, I think it would make our nations closer, but I think it would also, all of these weapons are designed to be a deterrent, and I think it could be a deterrent.
Brian, can I just push back on you just a tad?
Sure.
I love that you're always reminding us to think about the next administration and the next president, but I'm also cautious that I can't live my life. I don't think our country can flourish if we're always thinking about if we do this, but then what happens 4 years from now when the other administration? I think at some point you have to do what looks good in the moment. Of course, you're trying to plan for the future, but we can't not do it because we're afraid that the left might do it the wrong way 4 years from now. I think you have to, if this is what we think is good with Saudi Arabia, sure, things might change in the next administration, but I don't think that can stop us from thinking about how to make them an ally today.
I also think it'll be easier to get a good airtight deal with the Saudis than obviously it would be with Iran.
I hope it's a more airtight deal. I would say America's government is built on the idea that you think about the next administration and you have checks and balances so that the government doesn't do things that are going to screw things up for the country later. I think a statesman always thinks about what comes next. And I'm not saying President Trump's not doing that here. I'm just saying this has got to be a really good deal because when Trump's not in office or Rubio's not in office, you get a Biden-type competency in the office, and you tell me how other countries around the world are going to look at the United States. Let's make sure
we might need more deterrence then.
Right.
No, and you're right. I mean, this could actually, if you really build a strong coalition, and they're really a part of the Abraham Accords, I totally agree with you. Yeah. But execution is key here, and we don't know a lot about it.
Well, we won't build this on the back of a memo, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, before we go to break, I want to talk about some actual numbers because that's all we really know is what the market reflects. Those real yields are not necessarily reflective of growth. The real yield is just whatever the inflation-adjusted return is on a treasury right now. So are they bidding these yields higher because of growth? No, it's because of the spending overseas and the concerns about higher oil prices driving inflation and that driving interest rates higher by the Federal Reserve, which will immediately add to the interest on the debt and the deficit. because what is going on with these yields is that investors, okay, you're getting an actual real return on your investment. That's what a real yield is. But because our government has so royally screwed lenders to the United States in the last 6.5 years, if you lent money long term to the U.S., you have lost your ass in treasuries. If you look at the TLT, which is the long-term ETF for long-term U.S. government debt, including the yield that was paid out, you've lost 30% of your money since early 2020. So what's going on is investors increasingly, lenders to the United States, are demanding a higher and higher yield to lend to the U.S. That also plays into the supply that is coming online and will come online because now we've decided to enter a war. Whether you agree with it or not, that is more borrowing, that is more debt that has to be issued. So if you think 5%, 5.2 on the 30-year is pretty good, it's a decent inflation-adjusted return, well, it might go to 6 or 7 because that's what investors are going to demand. The biggest linchpin right now for oil, it's not that we're going to have a supply shortage, it's that prices are going to have to adjust to the upside to make up for the supply that is being lost in, 1, the Strait of Hormuz, 2, the Bab al-Mandab Strait coming out of the Red Sea, which was making up for the supplies lost in the Strait of Hormuz, the Black Sea terminals because of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and then the Russia refineries. Because remember, Russia cut off diesel exports out of the country. And the biggest linchpin is China, our ally? No, our adversary. And because China has reduced its crude imports by 41% year over year in June to a decade low, what if China starts buying more oil? That is a drain on, that's more demand and a bigger drain on supply. And so they're holding a lever that could shoot prices dramatically higher, and nobody knows how high. And nobody knows when China will do that.